So, yep, there we
There we go.
go. Awesome. So we will get started because I'm sure your time is so, so precious. So thank you so much for taking time to join us and chat with the Peloton Moms group. First off, before we get started, I always like to thank Lindsay, who shares her Zoom account with us, and we are recording it. So moms that can't join live have 30 days to watch, which is great. And then also thank you to Jennifer Crowley, who was supposed to be chatting with you as well, but she is under the weather. So she is watching, but has a case of the coughs and sniffles. So she didn't want to be coughing on camera tonight. So, but she does a lot to promote the event. So, and I know she is super bummed to not be chatting with you. So, but anyway, thank you to those ladies. And of course, thank you to all our moms who sent in questions. So let's get started. So before we dive into specifically talking about Malibu Rising, I was hoping maybe you could share a little bit about your path that led you to being a New York Times bestseller. It's kind of an interesting path, so I thought maybe you could share it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. There's a lot of zigzags, I think, but I grew up on the East Coast, and I always to work in Hollywood. That was the thing for me, was I wanted to work in film and television. And so I wasn't quite sure in what department or how I wanted to do it. I just knew that I wanted to. So I went to college in Boston. I went to Emerson College, which is a film and television school. And I got a film degree. And then I came out to Los Angeles and I got a job in casting because I was really fascinated with the art of taking an actor and putting them in a role, and how does that change the role, and how does that overall change the actor's career. And I was just really fascinated by that. So I got a job working for a couple of different people, but my main one was for Sarah Finn and Randy Hiller, who they don't work together anymore, but at the time they did some of the Fast and Furious movies. They did some art house movies. And then by the time I was like my third or fourth year there, and it was the last movie that I worked on with them was the original Iron Man. And so it was it was that process of casting Iron Man. How do you find Iron Man? And so that was really fun. And that was a really great way to end that. But I just felt like I worked for them for a number of years. I loved them. I loved my job, but there was just something about it that just felt like it's just not quite right. There's something else I want to do. And during that period of time, I had started just writing little anecdotal things that had happened to me, just emails to my friends. Most of my friends lived back home on the East Coast. I didn't really know very many people in Los Angeles. So I was writing these very lengthy emails about these crazy things, oh, I met this famous person, or, oh, I got pulled over and here's what happened, or, I locked myself out, and so I would just write these stories. But I got a lot of support from my friends about them. People seemed to really like them. And so around the time I left Finn Hiller, I decided I was going to try to write a novel. And so I bounced around jobs for a few years, wrote that novel, tried to get it published, it didn't get published. And then, but like enough people, enough editors at publishing houses said they would read whatever I wrote next. And so, so I thought, okay, if I'm going to take this seriously, like now. So I was very supportive, and I quit my job. And for 2 months, I wrote what became my debut novel, Forever Interrupted. And I published that 2013. And then I did a book a year after that for a long time until I had my daughter and changed up the genre a little bit. I just followed my heart a little bit in terms of like wanting to do something a little bit more daring and ambitious. And so since the Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo came out in 2017, I've been releasing a book every other year, which brings us to now.
Right. Amazing. It's there we have a lot of moms in the group that are aspiring writers, and so I think, it's always interesting to hear how, each author's, what their path looked like, and also, the struggles that you all have had at the
Yeah.
beginning. It's for most, I think it's fair to say that nobody had kind of instant success. And then it's,
Yeah.
of course, juggling becoming a mom and finding time to write and all of those things. So, it's certainly not easy. So let's dive into Malibu Rising. What was your inspiration for the book? Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I really wanted to write about a family. I wanted to write about a group of siblings who had to raise themselves. I was interested in that untraditional family structure, that sense of when there's a power vacuum, like who steps up to take on responsibility, and what does that person look like, and what is their life like. And so and then I also had an idea that I wanted to write about the children of a famous person, and the way that when fame has not been chosen for you, but sort of when you did not choose fame, but it has been chosen for you. And so those things came together in my mind at the same time that, I had read about this party that happened in the Hamptons in about, I think it was like 1963 or so, that it was just a bunch of teenagers, and it was like after a debutante party. It was like a pre-debutante ball party or something, and everything just grew wildly out of control so quickly, and it was like on the cover of Life magazine, of like a sign that the youth of America is is in decline. It's like the teenagers were left to themselves, and somebody's swinging from the chandelier, and they're throwing furniture out onto the beach, and they've broken every window, and all these formerly nice young teenagers were arrested. And it just seemed like a fun story area. And so I thought, well, maybe I combine this family story with this party idea that I've had for a while. And that was pretty much what I had. I sat down and really started researching Malibu and surfing, and let the rest of those details shape the story.
And did you write during the pandemic, or had you already kind of wrapped?
This book had been done for quite a while, so I actually think I turned it in, like the last draft of it 2 years ago. But I was writing during the pandemic, and I finished my next book during the pandemic, which was its own beast of a journey that I am happy to please not repeat in my life. I'm good with just the one novel during a pandemic, while also trying to keep a toddler alive. It was very harrowing, but it is done now, so I can look back. It's like childbirth, right? It's like, well, it's over, so it was fine.
Yes, I'm done. Well, that was going to be a question for later, so we'll circle back on what's coming after Malibu Rising. But so we're always really curious about your process. Did you plot it all out? Did you write it in a linear fashion? And did you always know where you were trying to get to?
Yeah, in general, I think very much. I know some of the big things that happen, maybe, but what I really know is where the story starts, what my premise is, and then where it ends. I always know the ending, and so it's really about like what I'm always writing toward something. But how we get there, I'm learning in my first draft, just like anybody else. And so this was a process of, there were a lot of things that were a surprise for me going through it. Even going back in time to tell the story of Mick and June, I didn't necessarily know I was going to I started to realize that we needed it. So I write everything linearly, so that my books aren't really linear, but I write everything the way that it is presented to you. and
Okay.
experience it the way that the reader does, because that gives me a better indication of what the reader wants at any given time.
Awesome. So in your acknowledgments, you commented that you grew a lot as an author from the beginning to the end, and that you ended the book in a much different spot than how you had started. So does that mean that perhaps you had a different ending and it changed?
No,
Okay.
the ending was always the same. And the story that you read is the story that I wrote, but how it's executed, the nuances of it, the you know, how the characters come in and out of the story, all that stuff, really, I benefited very greatly from my editor, Jennifer Crowley, who really, I would say with this book, there was the biggest difference of any book that I've written. There was the biggest difference between what I turned in as a first draft and what that book could eventually become. I just needed an outside perspective to kind of crack it apart and say, like, you know, I know you think that this works, but it's because there's a lot that you haven't put on the page, you know? And so she was very, very helpful with that. Be just a real blessing for me in terms of, I want to get better with every book, and Jen really pushes me to do that.
That's awesome. Did you, so you talked about that you knew you wanted to write about a family, you know, that was maybe left on their own. So the role of Mick, and he's not new to us as readers of you. He's appeared in both Daisy and Evelyn. What made you choose him to kind of be a recurring character in your novels? And was it always your plan to write about his family?
I don't. My plan, I think it happened quite organically. I think, you know, part of it, when I wrote The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, I just really liked writing his chapter. I found it really gratifying to watch him always think that he is one step ahead when in fact he's one step behind. And certainly with Evelyn, that was the case. And so I just really liked writing him. I don't like him, but I liked writing him. And so when it came time to write Daisy Jones, and I had this question of, you know, do Daisy and Evelyn live in the same universe? If you're driving down Sunset Boulevard, are you listening to Daisy Jones in the radio while there's a billboard of Evelyn's movie? You know, is that real? And I thought, well, let's do that. That sounds fun. So the through line for me became, well, let's put McRiva at the Chateau Marmont. That feels fun. And so when the question was, okay, so I want to write about a family, and I want to write about the children of a famous man, and I want it to be that they've had to raise themselves. The question's like, okay, well, what famous man would leave his children? It's like, well, I have one of those. And that's when the story really took shape for me, when the characters came in. It's like, okay, these kids were born in, you know, Malibu, or Mick Riva's kids. How does that unfold? What is that story? It became really specific to me at that moment. I know, you know, probably when they were born, which means I know when they're in their 20s, you know, everything started to take shape once he came into the picture.
So interesting. Were there any other connections between the three novels that maybe anybody missed? I think everybody kind of started really digging once.
Yeah, there's a lot, and there's ones that
Okay.
I forgot. You can, in this book in particular, I was really set on pulling these other two books into the same world. So if you go through and scan, you can see some characters' names from other books and little pieces that you can draw together. I put some in there for you.
Okay, awesome. It makes me want to go back and reread, you know, the other two actually. So,
yeah, I
really
mean, fun. I hope. Yeah, I do want the books to be able to withstand, you know, multiple readings if that's what you decide to do. And so I think, depending on what order you read the books in, you'll pick up different things each time.
Awesome. That's actually been a recurring question too in the group, is like, do you need to read the books in order? And we, you know, all of us that have read them have been like, no, no, no.
Yeah,
no.
any order you want. And I think somebody that reads them as like Evelyn, Daisy, Malibu gets something slightly different out of it than somebody that would read it as, you know, like Malibu, Evelyn, Daisy. You know, it's I think like a fun little puzzle.
Awesome. So did you have a favorite character from Malibu?
I mean, I love different people for different reasons. I'm obviously very taken with Nina. I spent a lot of time trying to understand her, and so I feel like a close connection to her. But that's true of Jay, Hud, and Kit as well. They were all a lot of fun to write, and they're all very different. You know, sort of unexpectedly, I really came to care very much about June. I didn't, she wasn't really on my mind at the beginning of the book. I wasn't asking myself, you know, who is June until she sort of unfolded in front of me. But I mean, I came to care about her and invest in her a lot.
Yes, we're going to circle back to June in a second, because I want to kind of now, that was a perfect segue, because I wanted to dive into like the family theme now, and the generational patterns. And Nina, you specifically reference, I think it's like page 191 in the book, about how family histories repeat. Is that a theme that you've experienced in your personal life, or where did you draw upon that to have that kind of theme appear?
I think it's just true. And I think it's just, I don't know if it's something that I've felt in my personal life any more than anyone else, but it's definitely something that I just see everywhere. We all have to be really mindful and active about how we exist in the world, and not fall back on the things that just come easy to us. And I think the things that come easy to us are the things that we've seen before. And so I was thinking a lot about that in terms of, you know, I have my own daughter, and what do I want to pass on to her, and what do I not want to pass on to her? You know, as the world changes, how do I want to actively change with it so that I can present a brighter, happier future for her that is not necessarily bogged down with some of the things that my generation took on. One is, you know, our relationship to women's bodies is changing very rapidly, and our society is really intense about it. And so I grew up in a world where there were certain expectations of what I was supposed to look like, and a lot of shame put on me and you know, the women of my generation for certain things. And I don't want that for my kid. And so how do I excise that from myself so that I don't accidentally give it to her? And you know, every generation is asking themselves those things about, you know, in different ways. And I find that really fascinating.
Yeah. So the 4 siblings, 3 with the same parents and 1 without. And then we obviously get a late, I'm trying to not have too many spoilers in here, but we do get another late introduction of a 5th sibling. Can you talk about each role that you kind of felt that they played within the family dynamic, and how the story then kind of integrated between each of their roles, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, I think siblings form in relation to each other. And I think it's not just true within the book, but I think it's true in general. The oldest child, you know, I think there is something to birth order. And I think part of that, you know, parents treat kids differently, and you can have siblings who grew up in the same house who have 2 totally different childhoods. And so you get different people as a result of that. But I also think it can be sometimes just as simple as, you know, I was the oldest. And so I could, you know, there was some pressure on me to do certain things, but at the same time, I'm the first one to ever do it. And I can do whatever I want. And my brother comes up after me, and there's already a me. So he's got to find a different way of being in the world, a different way to have a different way, you know, and so we form in relation to each other. And so I just took that principle and I said, well, you know, each one of these kids, Nina, Jay, Hud, Kit, they all come to this family or come out of this family, I should say, having had different childhoods. Nina's childhood is nothing like Kit's, because Kit has always had Nina, and Nina has never had anybody else. So what does that look like? You have two women, they grow up in the same family, they have the same mother and they have the same father, and yet their experiences are night and day. And I think, you know, in this version, that it makes Nina feel really responsible, and like everything falls on her, and there's no room for her to mess up, and there's no room for her to need anything or anyone. And on the other hand, you have Kit, who, you know, is sort of the person who's like, well, why are we all so afraid of these people? Why can't we just say what's going on? And it's like, well, you can be that way because you've always had Nina, because you know at the end of the day, Nina's going to be there for you. And so I think the way that those people form, nobody exists in a vacuum. We're affected by the people around us. And so that was fun for me to explore. Our brothers at similar ages, and yet they come into the world in very different circumstances, and you can see that 20 years later in what they're concerned about, what they're trying to prove to themselves.
And I thought it was so interesting. You broke up for a minute, so if I'm repeating something you said, I apologize. But I thought that Jay and Hud's relationship was so interesting, given them the fact that, you know, again, Hud was left at the doorstep, but their lives were so connected in terms of the photography and the surfing, and you know, a kind of a codependency, and then obviously the connection in their love life as well. But speaking of that, surfing and photography were big roles in the book. Do you are those hobbies for you? Do you surf? Do you do photography?
I wish I was cool enough to surf. I wish I had like any poise or like gracefulness in my entire body. I really don't. I gave it a try for the book, because you know, I figured I had to try, but no, I'm faking it. I'm doing it entirely from talking to friends who are surfers, reading books about surfing, watching surf videos, which is just about the most relaxing thing there is to do. I could just turn on surf videos and just pass out. It's just like, great. And yeah, it was about learning why someone dedicates their life to something that seems, not that it's foreign to me, but there's just a really big buy-in. Like, the Pacific Ocean is really cold. You're in a wetsuit most of the time. Most surfers serious about it are out in the water at 5 a.m., 5:30, you know. These are people that have a lot of passion and are willing to do a lot of things that to me seem terrible in order to do what they love. And so I really wanted to learn a lot about that. And I was very fortunate that I have a close friend of mine who has been surfing his whole life and surfed Malibu a lot back in the day. And he let me grill him for about 2.5 hours over lunch.
That's awesome. Yeah, so true. I think that I've surfed a little bit, and I think though that there's peace that you find when you're out in that water, or a sense of realizing how small you truly are in a big world. And I think ironically that's can be a theme in your book as well. So it's kind of interesting, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I think the ocean and the mountains do that in general, which is what's so lovely about them, right? It's if you want to remember how small you are, or, you know, both in terms of size and also just in terms of time that we've been here on this planet, you know, the water has been here far longer than us, and does not care about our problems. And there's something really.
Yeah, well, and then the power of both water and fire that appear in the book, right? With one fell swoop, you could be wiped out. So that's really interesting and common. Did you have a favorite moment that the siblings shared in the novel?
I mean, I like them all. I think when they discover the surfboard when they're kids was a time that just sort of snuck up on me. I didn't mean to write it, but it started to feel like that was the next thing that would happen in their lives, and just how joyful it was, and how nice it was to write it. So I have fond memories of that.
Yeah, and the joy that it brought Nina, for somebody that I felt like didn't have a
Yeah.
lot of joy at that point. She hadn't had much, so that
Yes.
was it was a nice reprieve and a moment of, you
Yes,
know.
absolutely.
So let's talk about fame. Evelyn, Daisy, and now Malibu all share central theme of fame. It's such a vast topic, but you always have been telling it from the female perspective. So, you talked a little bit about obviously being out in Hollywood and your path that led to your writing. So, is that what you've been drawing upon to kind of talk about, or is that where your influences are coming from?
Yeah, I think a large part of it, absolutely. I also think, I've just been fascinated by fame since I was a kid. I'm really fascinated. I'm less fascinated by the shine of famous people, although I'm also very fascinated by that. But what I'm more fascinated by is the inherent duality of fame. Uh, Anyone who's famous has to have a public image, and it's not who they really are, because we don't know who we really are. And that's actually a very vulnerable thing that probably only a few people ever get to see. And so I'm really interested in how vast the difference between those two things are. For someone like Evelyn Hugo or Daisy Jones, there's one story that's being presented to the public, and they're selling tickets based on that, and they're in movies based on that, and it's not who they are. And the tension between those two things, I think, is a really interesting area to tell a story.
Well, and then specific to Malibu, Mick is not the only one that is famous ultimately, right? Nina becomes famous in her own right. Jay does as well, being a pro surfer. But I think it's very clear that you depict some big differences in how they handle their fame. I mean, one would argue that Nina didn't really appreciate her fame at all and could care less about it. It was really just a vehicle for money for her to pay, to support her family and get them out of a really tough situation. But kind of talk a little bit about, is that, do you think, a generational thing? Did you do that intentionally, or was there any intention in the
Well,
differences?
well, I would say that fame is very different for Nina than it is for Mick, and what is expected from Nina is very different than what we expect from Mick. And so I wouldn't even say it's that Nina doesn't appreciate fame. I would say that it's that fame is much more invasive for someone like Nina. That we ask way more of a woman like Nina, and we expect a lot more access to her. And we feel most of the time like we have granted her success, and we're owed something from her as a response to that. Whereas somebody like Mick can do whatever he wants. And I think that's what's interesting to me is less how do the Ninas and the Micks feel about fame, and more how do we feel about the Ninas and the Micks of the world. Because in general, I think we think Mick can just, come in with a smile and we'll excuse anything that he wants. But Nina Riva better do exactly what we want. When we show up and she's there and we want her autograph, don't give me a hard time about it. And did was touch a little bit. Don't get upset about it. And that's what I wanted to explore with Nina, was less. I think Nina's not hungry for that type of validation the way that some of my other characters are and have been. But I also think that I would not want to be Nina Riva. I would not want to be often be treated as if my body and my image are for other people. I think that would be really hard.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, her fame resulted from a shot of her in a t-shirt, and
Yeah,
you know, I don't think that was necessarily her uh complete free will, if you will,
exactly. Yeah.
in making that. Yeah. um so something, this is my personal question. Talk about the party. So the party is filled with famous guests, and at varying degrees of just really loss of control.
Sure.
Um, and it was interesting to me that the disregard that they demonstrated, you know, for, I guess you would say, you know, a fellow celebrity and their home and their
Mhm.
possessions. And so is that, was that just evidence on the from the party that you talked about, you know, that you referenced in the 60s, or um why did you choose to have so much destruction? That was kind of interesting to me.
Um, I mean, I think it's just part of the premise. I think we're learning about this party because it all goes to hell. I think that's what makes it an interesting party. And I think, um, you know, what's fun about or what I hoped would be fun about something like this is that I don't want to go to this party. I don't want to be at a party where people are destroying things, but I totally want to be a fly on the wall and watch it happen, you know? And like
Right.
that feels like, well, let's do that in a book. Let's live vicariously through the moment where it's like, oh God, are they swinging from the chandelier? I don't
Yeah.
want to be in the room and be responsible for any of this, but at the same time, you know, let things get out of control and see what happens. And I think, you know, this is Hollywood in the 80s. This is a period of time of excess. This is a period of time in which, you know, obviously not everyone, but the zeitgeist is saying, you know, more, bigger, bigger, bigger. Greed is good. You know, what you want is what matters. And so like, let's see some of that play out here. Do people want to touch Nina? Do they think she's beautiful? Yes. Are they thinking about her when they're in her house? They're not. And I think that's a
Right.
lot about what fame is. You know, we admire all of these people, but they're not really people to us. They can't be. We don't know them. And so when you have all of these celebrities in this house, there's only a few of them who are stopping and going, is Nina okay? What's going on with Nina? How do we, you know, stop this from happening? And those people, Tareen, Vanessa, you know, those are even Tareen's boyfriend, Greg, those are the people probably more like the rest of us who are taking a
Right.
moment to ask those questions. But the fun is, I think, more in the debauchery and the people that aren't really thinking.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And in theory, right, it's a party that nobody was necessarily invited to, but
Right.
everybody came in different groups, and I'm sure in the roundabout ways are connected, but then it's maybe it's just their one chance for complete abandon and
Yeah.
utter chaos.
Yeah. Right.
I was like, oh my God, this is crazy.
Yeah.
Um, um, all right, so we got to segue into the television topic and the casting, because
Mhm.
we're so excited to hear that it's going to be developed as a TV series for Hulu. I think that was announced before the book was even officially released. So, are you involved in that process at all? Can you talk about timelines? Are you going to be involved in the casting?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm an executive producer on it, which is really lovely. We've been working with these incredible writers who've done a beautiful job thus far of trying to adapt it and get the, you know, really create the show. And it's going really well. I don't know about a timeline. These things always have, you know, multiple deadlines and so many hoops to jump through. But it's going really well so far. I'm very, very happy with it. I think the people, the writers that we're working with, two women in particular, Liz Tigelaar and Amy Talkington are just incredibly talented. And as for casting, I will actively be involved in it. It's super early days. There's no real answers, but I'm feeling very, very confident that we're going to get some very cool people for this cast, and specifically for Mick and June.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say Nina.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Nina, I think is a character who's going to be in every episode, and so that's obviously going to be an incredibly talented actress. What's fun about Mick and June is you can play with it a little bit more, because they're not as they're still in it a lot, but they're not the central character the same way. And so I just think in general it's going to be a very good cast. I'm very excited.
So my partner in crime, she just wrote Rob Lowe for Mick.
Oh, okay. I see that. That's a good idea.
He's got ties to Malibu too.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does.
So fun. So the other question, well, your other books are being optioned as well, but do you have plans, or did you have plans to continue this story? Because when you finish it, again, without giving away too much, there's definitely an opportunity to continue their stories in another novel. But now that there is going to be a show, does that impact your ability to perhaps not do another novel about them?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't impact my ability. What's great though is that I think there's a lot for these characters, and I don't know that writing another book about them is on my mind, or would eventually be the best course of action. But I do know now that we have all this runway to tell the story more. The TV adaptation offers so much more opportunity to have those questions. What does the next 10 years of their lives look like after this? Well, I don't know, but there's room to tell that story now that there wasn't before. So I'm really thrilled about it. And I have to say, out of any adaptation I'm doing, this one has the most excitement for me creatively, to get to follow them past the end of the book.
For sure. Although selfishly, I want you to write the book. I want you to write the all right. So I've got so many more questions, but I want to tie up too much of your time. And we say 8:45 is our East Coast time is our finish. So I think you've kind of answered it, but a lot of people did want to know if you envisioned anybody specific when you were writing your characters for Malibu Rising. And I think you've kind of answered that as no.
And no, not anybody specific. What's fun though is that I'm going to start to get to do that soon, and so I am just from having started in casting and now being a writer, it is like everything that I love coming into one moment. And so I think everybody on the team knows that there may be different aspects of the adaptation where I'm, I sit back a little bit, but when it comes to casting, I'm going to be at those casting sessions. I'm very excited.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, we'll can't wait to hear and who it is. So we always like to ask this question as well of our authors, but do you have any advice for, moms or any of our viewers that want to take a chance on writing, and you could be specific or general?
I think that my biggest piece of advice is to write something and finish it. And if that means that what you start with is a short story, if you start a song, if you start with like I did, of just writing little anecdotal stories of something that happened to you. But I think a lot of times we underestimate just how satisfying and also esteem building it is to just start small and finish it and see, because you can always rewrite it, you can always make it better, but just keep going and really finish something. Sometimes that's enough to get you through that feeling of I did it. Is the night that I finished my first book there's really nothing like it.
And would you say that that was your most difficult to write, was your first one?
No, the most difficult book to write was Malibu Rising, no question. It was so many characters and so many times, and a lot to service and a lot to take on. I bit off a lot and then had to chew it. And so that was by far the hardest one to write, and I am better for it.
Awesome. Awesome. So you touched upon it briefly, but you wrapped your next novel during the pandemic. Are there any details you can share about the book and a timeline?
I think it'll probably come out 2 years from now is my guess, just based on things coming out every 2 years, but I have no evidence whatsoever. That's just my guess. But I can tell you that I see Evelyn Hugo, Daisy Jones, Malibu, and this next one as a quartet, that they make a set in a certain way, in that they're all about women in the public eye. And so I have one more book in that space that I am interested in diving into, and that is this next one. And so I know Jennifer is asking if it's the 90s, and I've said it before, so I will say here that it is the 90s. Evelyn being the 60s, Daisy being the 70s, Malibu being the 80s. This one's the 90s. And then after that, I don't know what's next, but for now, the next one coming is I'm not going to say it caps off the set, because it is different, but it's going to live in that space.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, we're so excited. Look, everyone's like, so exciting. And before we wrap, this is a really good question that somebody just asked. And I just want to go back to Mick really quickly. Do you think Mick is capable of love, not including himself?
Okay, so this is a really interesting question, and it allows me to get on my soapbox. I think love means, so thank you for indulging me. I think that Mick loves June very much, and I think Mick loves his children, but I think that love is a gift that someone else gives you to feel. I think that my love for my daughter is something that feels really amazing in my chest for me. It doesn't mean anything to my daughter if I don't do anything with that love. So if you don't make your love for someone turn into something for them, caring, self, putting them first, thinking about them, if you don't turn it into anything, then it doesn't mean anything to them. So I think Mick loves all of these people, and I think it's a feeling that he feels for himself, and he hasn't done any of the work to make his love be something that they feel. And that's what frustrates me about Mick Reid.
That's, I think, a perfect way to kind of end talking about Malibu Rising, and then we will just ask you for kind of what you're reading right now and what you might recommend. But before you do that, it's flooding that how much this book has meant to a lot of people in 2021, and how grateful and thankful they are, and what an impact you've had on their life in a very difficult time. So I just wanted to share that with you in case you're not seeing all the chat.
That makes me very happy, and I have to say that the feeling is 100% reciprocated. I love my job, and I can't do it without all of you. And so my job and the passion that I have to tell a story, the excitement that I have about it is what got me through 2020 and 2021. And I don't have that if it isn't for you guys reading these books and engaging with them the way that you do. So it means that my book could make this past period of time, which has been so hard. It makes me so happy to think I might have made it a little bit better, but also know, like, you've made it better for me.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I think that that's probably the one, we were talking about this a little bit before we started, just, even how this group got started. But I think I'll always look back at this time as one of the most positive things that came out of it. Is it seems to me that there was a really huge resurgence in reading, and it serves as an opportunity for people to escape and to not watch the television, and just find solace in the written word. So I think if there are positives out of this time, that's certainly one of them. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Well said.
So what are you reading, or what do you recommend? And we will share these recommendations with the group. And I can assure you, probably whatever you say is, people they're on their Kindle, like ready
All right, great.
order right now.
I'm happy because I've got great ones for you. So I want to focus on 2 books in particular that are about famous people, because if you like this one, maybe you want a little bit more of that. The first is The View Was Exhausting, which I've been talking about all summer. It's by Michaela Clements and Anjali Datta. It's basically like, if you're into J-Lo and Ben this summer, you're gonna love this book. It's like this A-list actress, and she's got a scandal, and so she starts up a fake relationship one more time with her old boyfriend, and then while they're on yachts and parties and whatever, and being photographed and making it look like they're back together so she can get some good press, somebody falls in love with somebody else, chaos ensues. It's just perfection. It's so much fun. And it's just, if you like some of the fame in that, you'll like this. And then the other one, perfectly timed, Jazz, While We Were Dating. Anyone that's read any of Jasmine's books knows, like, she's just like a heavy hitter. You just know every time that you're just going to swoon. And While We Were Dating is about some A-listers and some shenanigans that they're up to as well. So those are two just really great books about fame. It's called While We Were Dating by Jasmine Guillory. So those are 2 that are sort of on theme. Some others that I have really loved is, I have gotten really into Evie Dunmore's books. So she did Bringing Down the Duke, and her second one, I'm of course blanking on the title because of course I am, A Rogue of One's Own. If you liked Bridgerton, these are just really fun, and they have this smart edge to them. They're about suffragists, like, they're just great. And that's like a really nice series that you can dig into, because I think her next one is it was just announced recently. And then the last one I'll give you is Casey McQuiston, One Last Stop. If you read Casey's first one, which is Red, White, and Royal Blue, so much fun. One Last Stop. It's about these 2 women who meet on the subway and sort of fall in love, but it turns out one of them can't get off the subway train because, in fact, she's stuck in a time loop and is from the 1970s. And it's like this really just fun romp.
Oh, awesome. Those all sound great. So my partner in crime has read all of those books and says those are the most amazing recommendations. So.
All right. Great.
Well, I can't thank you enough. This was so fun. I could talk to you all night. I'm sure you don't have all night, and I don't really either. My dog is barking, but hopefully, when the next book comes out, you'll come back and chat with us, or even if you have some downtime. I know people would love to chat about Daisy, and they'd love to chat about Evelyn. So,
awesome.
When you have a little bit of downtime, which I'm sure is not anytime soon.
I appreciate it. It means a lot for you guys to have me. This has been really fun.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Have a wonderful night, and go enjoy. You've still got daylight out in California.
Yep, it's dinner time over here. Well, thank you very much. Have a good one, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.